My guest today is David Iseminger. David is the CEO of IronWeave, which is a blockchain that allows you to own, control, and instantly share data privately and securely. That's the idea. That's what it will do. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you here, David. Let's do what we do at the beginning of the show. It would be cool if you could please introduce yourself. I would love to hear some of your personal and professional backstory. What have you been doing in the lead up to becoming CEO at IronWeave?
Sure. So a little bit about me. I was at Microsoft for 20 plus years, started out in the core operating system division working on scalability of the core OS. Had various roles there for a while. I've written about a dozen books on various technologies, including one for Dummies book, which was fun. And then I have a collection of online courses that I teach that are syndicated across over 1,000 different schools, teaching things like networking, web, blockchain, AI, machine learning, etc.
Yeah, well, that's a concise summary, David, but obviously you've been deep in the trenches, literally building this stuff and seeing the different phases of the internet and these systems play out over the course of your career, I suppose.
Yes, indeed. It's been a very interesting seat from which I've been able to watch what's happened with the world, what's the advent of the internet, the advent of blockchain, the advent of AI. It's been an interesting run, and I think it's the really interesting things are just getting started.
And so, why was it then, David? How did you end up just before we jump into IronWeave? How was it that you, I guess, ended up at IronWeave? What tickled your fancy? I'm sure you could have done any number of things, gone in any number of directions, but you've chosen data privacy on blockchain. Why is that?
So, with my background in scalable systems, I saw blockchain as being probably one of the most transformational sort of technologies that we had seen in a long time. But my experience in enterprise and in scalable systems, for example, in operating systems, told me that if it didn't scale, then the world wasn't going to come to it as quickly or ever. And so I just knew that in order for this revolution in blockchain technology and the idea to take, and for businesses to bet their businesses on it, it would have to be not only scalable, but private and secure. So in looking at the way that the architectures of existing blockchains worked, I just knew that anything that was bound to bog down from a performance perspective, the more popular it got, that just wouldn't fly. So I set out to figure out how to go about doing that with a different sort of blockchain architecture. And I did. I was riding on my lawnmower one day, and the notion came to me about how to make a blockchain system and environment and architecture scalable. And so I hopped off my riding lawnmower, went to my whiteboard, scratched out the entire architecture, at least the basis of it in kind of a stairway to heaven moment, and started building it from there.
Fantastic. And well, I'm sure that's the story of many tech startups. That's how it starts out, isn't it, David? Tell us then, give us the kind of I guess, what's the thesis? Give us the thesis for IronWeave. What is the big idea, David?
So the big idea is that in contrast to existing blockchains that focus on the chain itself, in IronWeave, we focus on the individual block. And so in order to make an infrastructure and a platform that is private, scalable, secure, and flexible, it had to have a fundamentally different design. So instead of having a central chain to which all transactions or interactions must reconcile, in IronWeave, there's an unlimited number of interacting chains. And whenever an interaction occurs, a new block is created and placed only on the participating chains, encrypted with a new set of keys, and available and accessible and known only by the participants. So we call it shared block architecture, and it's it's a significant departure from existing blockchains and how they work. Even some chains that may have a few different chains interacting, it's not monolithic. Each block is an individual interaction and independently encrypted.
And so, I know this is, slightly technical, but David, just simply explain what that allows in terms of, I suppose, the usability, that kind of scalability. I'm sure it's much easier to use, cheaper to use transaction-wise, that kind of thing than traditional blockchain architecture.
Exactly, Andy. All of the above, as a matter of fact. So, what this shared block architecture in IronWeave does is it takes the constraint out of this away. There is no central chain. So what you get is parallel block creation. You get horizontal scalability. So in IronWeave, you don't have to wait for all transactions to float or get pushed into a single block and then placed onto an individual chain. You can have millions of interacting chains having these interactions and creating these blocks independently and in parallel. So one way I like to compare this is imagine existing blockchains as like a single telephone call. You have to wait for somebody else to get off that telephone line before you can make a call. And then you have to wait again for somebody else to get off the line, and you have to wait your turn in line. IronWeave is like the entire telephone network where there can be millions of conversations happening simultaneously, privately among the people who are interacting. You can have conference calls, you can have long calls, you can have short calls. It enables you a lot of flexibility. Similarly, in IronWeave, you have a lot of flexibility because A, you have no set block size. B, every unit is independently encrypted based on the private keys of each individual chains. And because there is no central chain, you get that horizontal scalability just like the internet, where when you need more capacity, you add another node.
Yeah, fascinating. And of course, I suppose the reason that, first generation blockchains, thinking of Bitcoin really, and proof of work chains were designed the way they were, was because that was the security model that made the most sense by, architecting it block after block and then making those blocks essentially unchangeable or immutable. That is what gives proof of work chains their security. So you're talking about something completely different, David, and yet the same security benefits that a blockchain or someone would expect from a blockchain, those are still very much in place with IronWeave.
Yes. So, and I want to be quick to say that the idea of blockchain, the Bitcoin white paper, and all those things, those were really revolutionary. And
Yes.
so we're kind of standing on the shoulders of giants. And that's what you do when you're building new technologies and when you're creating new innovations and breakthroughs. You take what has been done before and you find a novel, creative way to make it work in ways that it perhaps didn't before. Uh, so in terms of how we've kind of used that inherent blockchain hash technology in ours, we've created, because of the architecture, it's essentially a three-dimensional hash network. So like if you and I participate in a block, so if I send you a stable coin, an IronWeave stable coin, so if a new block is created and placed on my chain and on your chain, and that block has a hash from the previous block on your chain and the previous block on my chain. So that new block is secured by the hash from my chain and your chain. But then when you go and have an interaction next with somebody else, a new hash is created from your previous block, which is the one that we created. But that next block that you create with whomever it is that you interact with next, not only will I have no access to it, I won't even know it exists, even though the hash of the security has been fanning out in a three-dimensional way based on every interaction that anyone has. So it's makes it very, very difficult to tamper with any block. But you would first have to even know it exists.
Yes, well, that's right. Fascinating, David. And talk to us then about the use cases. So it seems like, you're designing IronWeave with the intention that it be used for users, whoever that may be, to own and control and share their data, but in the most private and secure way possible. Because, of course, that's if we're talking about the early generation one blockchains, as discussed, why they were and remain very secure. Yeah, the transparency of a blockchain is well, it's not necessarily ideal if you're talking about storing your private data or financial transactions, things like that. So that's another part of the solution that IronWeave is offering, David.
Absolutely. So there are many use cases, and another positive effect of our shared block architecture is that the data is stored on chain. So a block can be the size of a small IoT update, or it can be an MRI. So there are many use cases, one of which is payments. So private secure payments that aren't transparent or scannable like they are on other existing blockchains, and enable participants to ensure that their activities aren't scannable by some bad actor and then either front run or somehow some AI is run against their pattern so they know either what's going to happen next with you or any of those sort of unpleasant things that putting all of your financial information out on a scannable network would enable. So there are many applications. So there's financial, there is IoT updates, as I mentioned, but perhaps another compelling use case for IronWeave is healthcare, because healthcare is very private. Health records are very private information, and putting those on a scannable blockchain or any sort of centrally reconciled chain, even if it's supposedly private, is just setting yourself up for unfortunate situations where a breach occurs, and a breach occurs, I don't know, a few times a day on a significant. I mean, there are all sorts of breaches all the time, but you can't open up a news website these days without seeing some sort of significant breach where some sort of centralized repository, where whether it's a central chain or just a centralized database, is breached and taken for ransomware. So healthcare is another aspect. Data provenance is another important aspect. So being able to prove that the data that is on chain came from the place it says it did. But increasingly and importantly, IronWeave is a great data environment and interaction platform for AI. So the ability to send small private data messages, small or medium size or whatever size, but to send these AI generated messages or based messages, whether they're a query or they're an instruction, among AI agents and ensure that those are private, secure, untamperable, but also auditable and with known provenance, has a lot of applications, and we get a lot of interest from folks on that front.
Yeah, well, I'm sure, David, because that is, the AI economy is just moving at well, at the speed of the internet, but probably faster. Incredible things happening there, and yeah, that's talking about those the breaches and data, David. It's there's kind of two things happening at once. As much as this AI revolution is happening faster than most people can really comprehend, at the same time, the legacy systems that so much of the world's infrastructure is run on are just slowly or quickly becoming faster and faster out of date. And as you talk about, those breaches are just going to increase in the age of AI, aren't they?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you asked about that, because the existing data stores that are used on the internet, I mean, these are artifacts of decades ago technologies. Now they've been updated to be able to store more and more data, which isn't necessarily a good thing. But you have these big data warehouses, these big data lakes that are sitting on the internet. They're supposedly, you know, secured and protected and all of that. But we were just talking about how those security mechanisms every day are breached. So these legacy systems were never purpose built for an always online world. We have these databases and these data lakes and where they have these large central repositories. The architecture of IronWeave enables this atomic unit of data, this block, to be created and secured and encrypted with a new set of keys with each interaction. So when we're talking about the data in an online world and an AI-enabled world increasingly, we do need to have a new unit of data, a new atomic unit of data that enables people to own, control, and secure their own interactions without it being grabbed by whether it's an AI agent or a social media platform, and then used however those actors, good, bad, or indifferent, see fit. So increasingly, data is vulnerable, but increasingly our lives are online. So the need to have a data unit that is purpose-built for an online world that is constantly 24/7, either under scrutiny, being scanned, or in the worst cases, under attack, that new unit of data enables people or organizations or companies or infrastructure providers or utilities, all of those, to be able to own, control, and if they want to, share their data in an incremental way. And with the architecture of IronWeave, with this unlimited number of chains, enables you to have purpose-built chains. A chain can be any person, place, thing, event, etc. So you can have one chain, for example, that is your currency account. You can have another chain that's your insurance account. You can have another chain for some event that you're going to conduct or have, let people in on. You can have a chain that represents just about anything and enable you to set either access rights, whether other people to access it, whether they can even see it. The flexibility in IronWeave in terms of the type of chains, the type of blocks, the amount of data, and the things that you can do with it are really only limited by the creativity of the folks who are going to interact on it.
So when people talk about this idea of a multi-chain universe, that sounds a lot like it, David.
Yes, but a multi-chain universe where blocks can be created in milliseconds and settled in milliseconds, which is what IronWeave can do, and where you're not waiting in line for somebody else to get done with their block.
Tell us where we are in terms of the product journey, if you like, David. I understand that you are working towards mainnet launch, and as part of that, there is a raise that you're undertaking at the moment. I believe there's also a token offering later this year. So just tell us how those pieces of the puzzle work together as we move towards mainnet launch, David.
Sure, happy to do that. So we have an up and running alpha version of IronWeave. And with that alpha version of IronWeave, we're seeing about 1 million interactions per second on fairly standard everyday server hardware on a single node. So, and as I mentioned, the architecture of IronWeave enables us to add a theoretical unlimited number of nodes. So each node that you add adds capacity, adds the ability for more TPS or IPS as we call it. So right now that alpha is up and running. As you mentioned, we're in the process, we're in a raise right now, and that will get us from alpha to testnet. And testnet will enable others to start playing with IronWeave fabric and building their own apps, et cetera, to test it out. We'll go from testnet to a token launch, and then thereafter we will get to mainnet. As part of our raise and effort and development process, we're also going to build an IronWeave app that enables private secure payments and an IronWeave DEX, decentralized exchange, that will enable private, compliant swaps at scale.
Fantastic. So yeah, lots going on then. So if people want to, participate in the alpha or eventually the testnet, or if they want to get involved, what are some of the ways that they can start to do that at the moment, David?
Sure. Well, they can get in touch with me. My email is solutions@upheaval.io. So Upheaval is the name of the company, and IronWeave is the name of our novel blockchain fabric. So they can get in touch with me, and I will happily respond to them and let them know about what's going on. So for the raise, I can also point them in the right direction as well. And you can go to our website, ironweave.io. There's not a ton of information there, but there's a way to get in touch with me there as well.
And who do you see as the end users of IronWeave? What are the kind of the different user segments or customer segments, however you want to break it down? And maybe also just include, I don't know if you see other chains as competitors or not. Just how do you think about the kind of the existing blockchain world, David?
Yeah, sure. So, so in terms of, I'll go backwards. I'll start with your last part of the question first. So we will enable other chains to connect to the IronWeave fabric to enable you to use ETH, for example, to go into IronWeave and do private, secure, compliant transactions and payments in our fabric. So we intend to connect to the greater ecosystem of the various chains, and that's fairly established technology at this point. There's quite a number of layer zero like providers, Hyperlane, et cetera, that enable pretty seamless and pretty secure interactions among chains. But in terms of how we see users, many times when new blockchain platforms come out, they just build the chain, copy, paste, and change a couple lines and release the chain and hope that others will come. We are not being so complacent. So we are building out the IronWeave fabric and enabling basically anyone who has some sort of creative aspiration to build things on it. But we're not stopping there. We're also going to build the app that I talked about that will enable private, secure, compliant payments. And we'll build the DEX. All of those things will come out with mainnet launch. So we're starting with the world's most valuable data, which is financial data. And that's already market. There are already a lot of people using that. There's 60 to 80 billion dollars that trade hands every day on crypto exchanges. So it's not like we have to go make a market for that. It exists. We'll also be releasing an IronWeave stablecoin eventually. And there's also a very big market for that. So imagine stablecoin that you could use for private, secure, compliant payments, not having to show everyone what you're doing. We believe there's a lot of capital sitting on the sidelines that would join this foray and this next generation of payment infrastructure if they could do it privately. So we're going to start with the world's most valuable data, which is financial data. But we have arrangements and agreements with companies who are doing, for example, private secure healthcare records on chain. We have a number of AI companies that we have LOIs with who are going to build various versions of their infrastructure on IronWeave to enable them to do what I was just describing earlier, which is to have these private, secure interactions among either people and AI agents or AI agents and themselves. And the next logical capability is for AI agents to make payments on behalf of their owners. That is something that just can't be handled with the existing financial infrastructure, nor even the blockchain infrastructure. I mean, you're talking about micropayments that when you have to wait in line for a long time, then that AI agent is kind of sitting idle. So we have a solution for that. But really, data provenance, identity, the way that I think of it and the way that I describe it is, for example, when Windows came out, it was an operating system that enabled people to build their own applications. So the Windows OS gave you 2x4s so you could go build whatever kind of houses that you wanted and arrange it in ways that enabled you to create some application of value that enabled you to make money on the Windows platform with your own software. With IronWeave, we are giving you steel I-beams, iron I-beams. We're giving you girders so that you can go build your own skyscraper, so that you can go build your own bridges, so that you can go build whatever ironclad infrastructure that you want in this next generation of the internet that we're on the edge of realizing, but do it in a private, secure way that enables you to build things that are strong and can't be scanned by anyone or by a teenager who happens to have a server under her desk. So the intent is to create a platform that enables people to use their own creativity and build their own empires.
Fascinating, David. And, it makes, I'm curious, as, you explained at the beginning of this show, you spent, 25 years at Microsoft, working on, scaling Microsoft and the OS stack, etc. So you've been, as I said, sort of, you witnessed the different phases of the internet. Are you, and obviously you're very passionate about building this next phase of the internet. Are you sort of disillusioned with, what happened with, I guess, what people call Web 2, where we're sort of at the moment with the, the centralized, gated, walled gardens of, your Googles and your Facebooks, where people spend the majority of their time, and that sort of that free wild west open internet of lots of different blogs and websites and so on doesn't really exist at the moment. So it's kind of, we're in that weird transition phase at the moment, and it's people like you that are trying to build something better. But as you reflect, do you sort of see the missed opportunities along the way and some bad choices that were made that gave power to these corporations?
So I see that there were a lot of choices that were made along the way that enabled what I refer to as capitalistic aggregation. So the people who have money continue to get more money, and it wasn't long ago, and it still is true today, that data is money and power and attention, etc. So one of the things that I'm hopeful that IronWeave will enable people to do is to own and control their own data, so that they don't have to go through Facebook, for example, to be able to share their information with people. I'm optimistic in that I think there are all sorts of new opportunities that come up, and maybe what was a good idea a long time ago isn't such a good idea today. And let me give you a couple of perhaps technical but examples that provide a little bit of insight into how, if you haven't been there and seen these things come about, you don't realize the implications of some of those choices, like you said, that you make, that end up being kind of not very forward thinking, or as the phrase goes, not enabling you to see around corners. So one example is, a long time ago, in a network far, far away, there were two competing protocols. There was TCP/IP, and then there was Novell's IPX/SPX. So IPX/SPX, that was in a lot of networks, and it was very chatty, and it didn't scale, and there were things that were architecturally inherent in that protocol that basically didn't enable it to scale, didn't enable it to see this new world where everything we do is online. So they lost. And now no one uses IPX/SPX. Well, there are probably 3 people who still do. Another example is DNS versus WINS. WINS was a flat file that let you look up somebody's name in a directory service. But it was a flat file. It was a single monolithic file, and it had to be unique. That name had to be unique within that WINS file. DNS comes along, and it's hierarchical. There's not a single node. There's not a single entry. You can have all these various entries that scale horizontally and enable you to do all sorts of things to extend what's happening. So now we come along and we have, and again, respect to the innovation, but we have monolithic blockchains that are trying to scale in a world where scalability means hundreds of thousands or millions of interactions per second, and data that it needs to be on-chain and private. These are things that you need, that you inherently have to build into the architecture to begin with, because you can't bolt it on later. So what these things are also intending is the ability for people to have their own data stores, their own cloud services that don't depend on AWS, for example. A lot of the technology out there today, there's a lot of innovation that's happening on it, but when you're depending on AWS, you get the possibility for breaches because somebody gets into your AWS username, password, whatever, your environment. So it's not disillusionment, but it is, boy, it's good to think things through and imagine a world where you're having millions of interactions per second that need to be private, secure, and more than that, but an environment that anticipates growth along the scales of a world where AI agents are running around doing things for us and buying stuff for us and delivering to our doorstep.
Yes, indeed. Fascinating. Thank you for sharing those thoughts, David. Fascinating indeed. Look, as we finish up this part of the podcast, then, David, again, tell people where they can go just to keep up to date with what you guys are doing, what you guys are building at IronWeave, and if people want to look deeper at the raise and so on, what is the best way for them to do so?
So the best way for folks to get, so we're on X, we're at LinkedIn. At LinkedIn, I'm David Iseminger on LinkedIn. We're IronWeave on Twitter. IronWeave.io is our website, and you can get a hold of me at solutions@upheaval.io. And you can go to that website and get contact with me, and I will follow up. I'd be happy to share more about what we're doing.
Excellent. Well, it is time to finish up the show, David, and we do that, of course, by running you through the very famous Crypto Conversation hot take round. Are you up for it?
I'm up for it.
I'm just going to run some questions at you, David. Just want you to give me your honest, rapid fire, hot take style answers, if you like. Question one for you. Let's see what you have to say. Question one is, where would you say that you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-chain opportunist spectrum?
I would say I'm on the multi-chain opportunist spectrum.
Yes, I thought so. What would you say then is your firmest conviction crypto opinion, David?
Everybody needs privacy, and it's just not there right now, and we have solved it.
I love it. I love it. All right. Bill Gates famously said we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. 10 years is a long time in computing. It's a long time in blockchain. Anything you like here. IronWeave, what does it look like in 10 years' time?
IronWeave is the underlying fabric of payments, of AI agents, and of private secure interactions where people can own, control, and instantly share their data with anyone they choose.
I love it. All right, here's a quote you will have heard, David, from William Gibson, who famously said that the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. With that in mind, what's an example of the future being here right now, but most people aren't aware of it?
I would say that there is an opportunity to disrupt these traditional financial and other systems. We have a great commodity and access to the online world. You just have to be creative and determined to be able to do what it is that you want to do to make that world that you see a reality. And we're taking the long game at IronWeave. We believe we will be here in 10, 20, 30 years.
I love it. Very well said. Final question for you, David, is what is your favorite science fiction book, film, or TV show?
That would have to be one of my favorites in the last few years was Travelers. Thought it was great.
Travelers, I'm not familiar with that. Is that TV? Is it a book?
It's I believe it was on Amazon Prime.
Very good. All right, I have to look that up. Travelers on Amazon Prime. David, thank you so much for coming and spending some time with us today. It was a pleasure to talk to you, pleasure to learn all about IronWeave. Thank you for coming on. The website is ironweave.io, and that is in the subject. The show notes, I think we just lost David's connection, but that's okay because it was the end of the show. So thank you, folks, for listening here at the end of the show. Please remember to subscribe to the Crypto Conversation so you know when each new episode drops. That is it for today. Thank you to David. Thank you to IronWeave. And thank you to you, the listeners. Bye for now. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave New Coin.